Hello and welcome to this Substance 3D Painter beginner tutorial in which I'm going to show you really from scratch how to use Substance 3D Painter, from importing a 3D mesh, understanding the UV process or also the baking process, how to use simplified layers, how to use a brush where you can paint on top of your models, and of course, like basic materials, also smart materials, normal maps, roughness maps, and so on and so forth, the whole thing. And also, of course, how to integrate Substance materials you can download from Substance source. So let's get started and let's jump straight into this fun. When you open Substance 3D Painter, you can see here on the canvas the standard layout. You have on the left side a tool palette, some material in the libraries, materials, smart materials. Then you have also masks, filters, brushes, textures, and so on. And in the center of this canvas, you will see then, of course, the 3D model, which I'm going to load from scratch. And on the right side, you see texture, set list, you see properties, layers, and texture set settings. So let's get started. First of all, when you start from scratch, there is one particular thing I also wanted to mention. First of all, you can select a model and load an OBJ or FBX file, but you should also realize that there are some specific templates. And as you can see, there is a PBR metallic roughness starter asset, so to speak, like template. There are other PBR metallic roughness templates you can load from. Each specific template serves a little bit of different purpose because you can find, like for instance here, for the Unreal Engine, something that is a template made, or for a V-Ray material and so on. But I will jump into those templates later on. And for the beginning, I want to show you how to start something from scratch without using any of these templates. The only thing I want to mention is, as a beginning, it's totally fine if you're using the document resolution 1024. And for the normal map format, by default, if you don't choose any template, it's OpenGL, and you have those two you can choose from. Either it's OpenGL or DirectX, which the engine is going to render your normal maps. The difference is that the green channel is usually flipped. That's a very common thing. But I get also then into those details once we are in the process of creating some normal maps. Everything else for now you can leave by default at the default settings and just select the model you would like to load. So you click on the model, and as you can see here, I'm going with the Meat Mat OBJ model. That's the basic model you can get from the sample projects, but I just didn't want to load the sample project itself. I really wanted to show you how you start from scratch when you load a model and what you have to take care of and what you have to really work on when you get started. So first of all, as you can see, once the model is loaded, the navigation is very simple here on the 3D canvas. You push the Alt button, and then either way, you use a Wacom board or you use your mouse. But if you use your mouse and you click a left mouse button while you're holding down the Alt key, you can rotate. If you push the middle mouse button and hold the Alt key, you can navigate left and right. And if you basically use the right mouse button on your mouse while holding down the key, the Alt key, you can zoom in and zoom out. So that's for the basic navigation. As I mentioned before, on the left side, you see those tool palettes. You have a brush, you have an eraser, and so on. That's very similar to Adobe Photoshop. And then you have also here in the Assets tab, all different assets or project-based assets, starter assets, and so on. And when you switch from all assets to project-based assets, you can see that on the project assets there is nothing, and it's empty because we just started an untitled project that is not saved, we didn't bring anything into the scene file, that's why you will not find anything here. If you really stick to your projects and you don't want to make sure, you want to make sure that your project is not getting super large or whatever, you can definitely choose this for organization purpose and then load assets also into your project file. But anyways, I get to all those details later. How do we get started? How can you start painting on your model in a very fast and quick way? Well, as you can see, when this geometry and OBJ file was created, it was created in 3 different parts. You can see we have the head as number 1, the body number 2, and the base as number 3. When you create that asset in your 3D software of your choice, it's very important that you also unwrap those objects accordingly. And you can check also if this object was then unwrapped accordingly. Very simple, of course, in your 3D software package. But you can also in Substance Painter check like if there are, any UVs already unwrapped or created. And by clicking on this button here, you can see, you can choose, you would like to see 3D and the 2D space at the same time. You can also switch between F1 and F2 or F3, and you can decide like, okay, how would you like to see everything? You can see now the 3D model on your left side, and on the right side you can see how the UVs are laid out, and you see also a basic material that is automatically assigned to. If you would like to change now something on the head, and if you would like to start painting on the head, then you can see that there is a base layer. I can also delete that and the property settings are gone, and I can start with the new painting layer. That painting layer you might be very familiar with, like in Photoshop, is very similar. You can see here you have normal, pass through, replace, multiply, divide, all those operations and functions, how this layer should behave once you're painting on. You can also see that you have here the brush size in the properties of that paint layer, and you can change, of course, the brush size. This is for pressure sensitivity, so if you use a Wacom board and a pressure sensitive pen, then you can turn this on. If you use the mouse, you can turn it off. You have flow, stroke, opacity, and spacing, and jitter angles, and so on. Similar options, you can also create a brush inside of Photoshop. Also here an alpha map and so on. I think what is the most important part is for beginning and painting is actually the material section itself. When you click on that tab, you can flip through those sections. But as you can see, you have more than just a color information on those settings, material settings here. You can see you have color, you have metal, roughness, normal, and height. Now, if you want to turn off one of those channels or elements, so to speak, you just click on it and you see once they're unticked, the only thing you have left over is the color, as you can see here. And there is a base color which is currently white. You can change this to red, and now when you start painting on your model, you can see, aha, okay, now I'm starting painting immediately on my model. And this is pretty cool and goes very fast because you can see, yeah, it in real time. That is fantastic. So, but as you also notice is from the layer management, it's very similar to like Photoshop. That means you can keep going and paint on the same level here just by choosing a different color, and now choose blue and make this look a little bit more goofy. But as you can see on this layer, you can also hide and unhide that layer and see what's going on. Now, what is different to Photoshop in this particular case is already the difference that you can now turn on the metal or the roughness, normal, and height information. So when you do that here and you turn on the metal, let's have a closer look what it actually does. you can see here in the metal tab, you have values between 0, which is black, or 1, which is white. Now there is a little preview window, and you can see what that value actually means in the preview and what it does. It actually is changing the so-called index of reflection, the IOR, and the behavior, how this shader or material is going to behave. 0 means like it's not metallic, and 1 means it's fully metallic. So why can you not see this immediately here when you change the metallic value on that paint layer? Well, this is because when you have been painting before on the color information, there was no metal information assigned to, and that's why you can't see anything. You have to paint while you also have to have that specific information activated. So let's have a look. If I basically increase my brush size here and I paint over this whole layer here, you can see that the behavior of my material is already changing of this paint, and the reason why is because I changed it to be metal. Now if I change this to 0, you can see when I was painting with 1, nothing is going to change here, because while I was painting, the behavior of that material was set to 1. Now if I change this to 0, you see now it's more like plastic, it's not metal at all, because I'm painting over here, and I can do this on the 3D model, or I can do this on my UV sets. Yeah. So this is, I think, from the beginning, very, very important to understand. Now, when you do this with the roughness map or with the normal map and the height map, it's basically the same as long as you are using a paint layer. Now let's have a look here. When I activated now also the roughness, you can see in the preview what it does. So if the value from the roughness value is at 0, it basically means you have a super sharp reflection. And if you put it to 1, the reflection is not sharp anymore. It's so blurry, in fact, that you lose the entire reflection value. That's the basics of PBR materials and PBR shaders. So again, if you see here that in the preview, the sharpness of your reflection is at 0, that means it's super sharp. You don't see it because you didn't actually paint while your roughness value was at 0. So now if you brush over, now you can see, whoa, wait a minute. Now the reflection is like super crisp. It's super sharp because you can see here in the preview a very sharp reflection from this current environment. This environment is nothing else than a so-called HDRI environment, a high dynamic range image, which has more than just 8-bit. It's a 32-bit floating point image, but you can see here. I also will talk about how you can change the environment, lighting scenarios later on, but for the beginning, I want to give you a quick start how to start painting and use different materials as a beginner. Now, this would be the first way and first approach. Of course, you can also go now in and create on top of it a different layer. And as you can see, I can change now on top of it here my color information. And if I'm changing also my size, I can start painting on top of it. And yep, I'm getting here a little nice painting on top of it. Now, what also is different is that you just don't have color, metal, and roughness information. You also have normal and height information. And let's jump straight into that. So first of all, also what I wanted to show you is, before we go into the normal, very simple. Keep in mind in the tool settings you have here the paint tool. But if you switch to the eraser tool, watch what's happening. You see here on the right side, when you switch from paint to the eraser, those properties are basically not present anymore. They disappear because that tool, the eraser, will not give you those options and features. But what you can do right now with the eraser is you can go in, and on that specific layer I can delete, like for instance here, the face I was painting. Then if you jump back to the painter, to the color, you can see, okay, I could paint now in my color, etc. But you can also do so much more. I can turn off the layers here on the bottom. I can blend and mix them, etc. But now I would like to show you a very simple and straightforward like normal map. How can you add details on your model? Well, on your model, you can add details by adding normal maps when you also browse through your different textures. You can see all libraries is selected. You have here smart materials, you have masks, you have brushes and so on. But what's important also is like that you have here under your textures different texture maps. And a normal map has this, I would say like purplish color. And you can also use the browser here as a filter by typing in normal. And when you do that, you can see you get different kinds of normal maps. So you can select one of the normal map and drag and drop it into your normal map. You have here a little preview window, and then you see how this will behave while you're painting. So let's see what it does. I can click on it, and currently on my layer number 2, I'm just painting with the normal map, and it looks pretty freaking good, right? Pretty nice. And keep in mind, you can undo by Control Z, of course. You can paint directly in 3D on your model, but you can also, if this is easier for you for positioning, go on to your 2D UV laid out map and paint on top of it. So if you would like to create, more details or whatever, and you say like, okay, I would like to paint details on top of it and get into that, you can do this very quick and very simple by adding those details. So it's very similar. The normal map is very similar than like the height map, how to do that, how to use it. The big difference is that those height maps are basically there to generate really a difference in the geometry once you use it in your final render engine. So for example, if you would create here another layer, and you could also say then displacement or height map, whatever you like to call it, you can see that you have here different height maps, and when you turn on the filter, I can bring this into my height map, and then I can do literally the same what I did with my normal map. But in this particular case, if you are going to export then a height map, it's going to be used in a different way on the geometry on or in the render engine you would like to use further on, because it's really trying to distort the geometry, it's trying to change the geometry. So, but as you can see, as a starting point, those are really the basics. By the way, I think that's very neat. When you have all those basics like color, metal, roughness, and normal, you can also click the Alt key on your keyboard and left mouse click on one of those tabs, and then everything else is deselected or deactivated, and only that specific element is activated. So if you would like to paint only, have here red, now I have only my paint value. If I would like to create a normal map and just do that, now it's only creating my normal map. Now let me show you the difference between a paint layer and a fill layer. Now, when you click on the fill layer, you can see that all those elements have been automatically created. You can see height, normal, roughness, and so on. And if you change now the color, you can see, wait a minute, because it's a fill layer, the color information is changed immediately. It's not like a paint layer. So while you're changing this, it's immediately changing the value. The same is happening in the metallic element, because as you can see, if I'm changing here the value is changing automatically. That's the big difference to the paint layer, because in the paint layer you would need to paint over again. You can also see it very clearly in the roughness. Now, super nice to see when the roughness value is set to 0, you can see how sharp that reflection is, and you can clearly see how that reflection is so sharp that the entire HDRI environment is visible, right? So that's the big difference between a fill layer and a paint layer, that you basically see those values instantly. Now the next thing I would like to show you is also the difference between a basic material and then smart materials, and also how to download from Substance source base materials, input them, and use them on your model immediately. And also I show you some issues what a lot of artists are asking me when they begin using Substance Painter, because they feel like, wait a minute, the smart material isn't working, and it's mainly because the baking process didn't start. So by default, you have some basic materials, and you can just select that material, drag and drop it onto your model, and then you can see, as I explained before, what this is doing. You see there is one layer. It's a very simplified base material, and you can change the color. It's basically acting like a fill layer, and you can see, wow, I can, like I did before with the fill layer, immediately change my behavior. I have here also basic metallic information and my basic roughness information, and there is nothing really special on that base material. Now what you can also do is, you see other base materials here, you can just drag and drop it either way on the model or on the UV layout and put it on top of it. And as you can see, one layer after the next layer is going to be created. Now you can also check this. You can blend in between. You can also unhide those layers and then create your own material as you want to. If you like a really nice glossy plastic material, so this is how you can create something very simplified. There is, for instance, metal, and you can put it on top of it, and it goes very quick and fast, and you can swap out those materials like instantly and see those results. Now let's have a look at smart materials and why they do not work right off the bat, like when you try to assign them. And I would like to show you. First of all, I delete all those simplified layers here, and I put on, let's say, the steel paint smart material. So when you do that, the loading time is a little bit slower, but you can definitely see there is an issue, right? You see a preview window here, and that little thumbnail, the steel painted scraped green, does not look like it should look like. The preview is completely different than in your viewport. And when you also look into the layer, you can see that a smart material is a combination already of different layers, fill layers, paint layers, dirt maps, filters, and so on. And this is what makes this material much more complex. But at the end, it also looks much, much better. Now, what's the problem here? Why is a smart material not working on this sample file when we imported it? And I would like to show you again. We basically started a new project. There is nothing special on it. We brought in this model, and we selected it and we said okay, and that's basically it. Keep in mind that OBJ geometry has really nice UVs, was unwrapped perfectly, and that's very, very important to do in your software. It doesn't matter if you use 3ds Max, Blender, Maya, Cinema 4D, or any other software, but the UV layout really matters. And the reason why that smart material is not working is because we didn't bake the geometry yet. We didn't do or not geometry, I would say, we didn't do the baking project, the baking process with the mesh and the maps. So in order to get this done, you have to go to texture settings, and then you see here, bake mesh maps. There's this little button. And when you click on it, you see that the baking dialog box opens. And here you can specify what specific baking texture resolution you would like to get started. For the demonstration purpose, I just use 1024 because it goes quicker. And then you can also see here on the left, well, wait a minute, what specific maps would we like to bake and create? And as a starting point, you can leave everything by default, the normal map, world space ID, ambient occlusion, curvature, and so on. But it's important that you do that step, that you do this process, because if you don't, Substance 3D Painter cannot use smart materials, because you need to have those baking maps and that information in order to create those smart materials. So first of all, you can select like, hey, do basically the bake on all selected texture set lists or just on the head itself, whatever. But watch this. Once you do this and you say like bake selected textures, now Substance is doing this magic and it's creating those maps for you. It's very, very important, because without those maps, as you can see, it's not working. But now, after baking, look at the difference. We did it here, and now you can see, wait a minute, this looks precisely as the preview thumbnail, like the steel painted scraped green smart material. So as you can see, without baking, without the baking process, it's not going to work, because the mesh or the material creation is in the need of those baked texture maps. So that's the magic. That's very, very important. Now, after the baking was done, you can see those mesh maps are visible in the texture set settings. You can find them here, right? And you wonder where those maps are being stored. And when you click on the texture maps, you can see there are so many texture maps here, but this is because it's in the all library. And if you switch to project, now you can only see the mesh maps that have been created for that particular project, and you find them all in here. So that's very, very important. If you always wondered like where this is, so this is where you can find it. This is why smart materials might not work at the beginning, and this is what you have to do in order to create then texture maps and export them. Now, the cool thing is, if you go now back to all the libraries and you assign now all those different presets or smart materials you can use and pick from, you can see it goes super quick and easy, because you just select something, put it on top of it, and now you get those nice worn out edges or whatever, and you can start using those presets and materials to create something you always wanted to create. Now, that being said, of course, like in the layers, you can see you can create then your own layers on top of it. You can choose again what I showed you before, like on the head, etc. If you create a paint layer, like you want to paint something on top of it, you know now exactly how to do that. You can use white color and just paint on a smiley face or whatever, and you can keep going and you can create something, whatever you would like to do. So those are really the basics. And before I close this chapter of the basics, I want to show you a very quick way how to export those texture maps, because of course you would like to use those texture maps then in your other software package for rendering, game assets, level creations, whatever you like to choose. The easiest way is, of course, here you pick basically like an output folder of your choice, pictures or whatever. Select this folder, and then you can see that there are some presets. That's probably the fastest way to export your texture maps. You see there is like for offline ray traces like V-Ray, of course, the workflow for metallic and roughness, but you also in the offline ray tracer workflow, you have specular and glossiness, which is exactly the opposite. But you can use those presets in order to export the texture maps for that specific engine. engine as you like. You can also see like here there is, for example, the standard PBR metallic roughness workflow. So you can choose that, then choose the format file of your choice, PSD, PNG, Targa, whatever you like, lossless, etc. And then the size, would you like to export a 4K, a 2K, texture map, and so on. And this is basically it. And there are, of course, also output templates. I will show you then later on how to create templates for yourself that you're happy with, what it actually means, how to do that, and so on. But if you do that and you say like, yep, I'm happy with this, you can also select like, okay, what texture maps would you like to export, head, body, or base? I just, for the demonstration, would like to export only the head, and then you can see that my PBR materials, or sorry, my PBR texture maps are going to be exported. So I click on export. This process goes super quick. We have been exporting them in 8-bit. You open the output folder, and then here we go. You see like, okay, I have other stuff in this folder dumped, like whatever, but you can clearly see I have here my base color, and this is how the texture map looks like. And then you have normal maps, displacement or height maps, roughness, and so on, whatever you like for your game engine. So this is kind of like the beginning of this Substance Painter beginner tutorial. Of course, I go a little bit more in depth than in all the functions and the brushes and the materials you can create, but this should give you really a quick, super fast idea how to use Substance Painter. But before I close this chapter, I think there is this little bonus I wanted to show you. I really want to show you is how to download and import from the Substance source material library any material you would like to use on your model, and how to get this done quickly. So if you are using the Substance tools, then one great tool is, of course, using the Substance source materials. When you go there, you find free materials, you find a lot of different materials you can choose from and select from. And the good news is like you don't have to, create any material from scratch. So that means if you would like to choose a specific fabric, you can basically go there. You see like all the different fabric options you have and download that material and bring it into Substance Painter. It doesn't matter if it's camouflage or whatever, and so on. But you have marble you can pick from. You have like paint, patches. I mean, there is so much, terracotta and so on. Bricks, as you can see here, you can choose from and then download and use it. So I don't know, I just pick one here. Let's click this one. It's called Old Painted Brick. And as you can see, when I click on the download option here, which is super simple, of course, you also can click on this material and then say like, oh, let me see a little bit more. You can also click on the web player and you would like to see it in action. You can also make like material adjustments like in the web browser. But what I wanted to show you is like when you click on that Substance source material, you can download the SPSAR file immediately, right? And what this means is basically even by changing here in the web browser colors, patterns, or whatever, right? You can download that base material. And here comes the magic, because once you downloaded this, all you have to do is drag and drop this from the file into your Substance Painter asset library, and then specify and say like, wait a minute, I would like to import that material. It's called Old Painted Brick Wall. And then it's undefined. You click on it and say like, this is a base material. And then under import resources, you can say either you would like to have this always in your library assets available or in this project. So you click on this project, import it. Now here it is. And now what you can do is you drag and drop it to your object of your choice, and you can see that material is on it. It was loaded. So you can see it and you can use it instantly. Now you can also save this as, I don't know, I call this here demo. And when you do that, you can clearly see, wow, I have that material instantly loaded on my, on my model, which is super cool. I also like to switch then here to 3D only, that you can see this a little bit better. But I think that is really amazing. Now, as you can see, I can delete the layers underneath, but I could create layers on top of it, as I showed you before. And I could, also here with the color, I showed it before, like paint something on top of it, like a graffiti or something like this, right? And it's super cool. Now, also what you can see here in the parameters of that specific old painted brick wall, you have now a lot of different options because you can choose or, make changes on the attributes of that specific material. You also can load immediate presets because you can see here there is an old brick wall. You can choose from the freshly or one or whatever. You can go back and forth. You can change roughness. You can change metallic. And of course, whatever that material allows you on parameters to change, this is what you can do in Painter. But, it basically also means you don't need to reinvent the wheel all the time because you can literally use the library, go inside of this library, pick from different materials you really like, and assign that and make, some minor adjustments, whatever you really feel like. You can also see like you have scaling options that you can influence. You can also rotate the directions you would like to influence it. And for instance, if my model should have like like strong as a brick, should have those options, then here is how you can do that. Now, this is really fun. I think this is where Substance did an amazing job uh, because I feel like, especially when we're talking about bricks, rocks, stones, it really doesn't matter. You have so many options here, and you can also go in and find those materials, like by typing in, for instance, rocks or whatever. And then you get all those different options. And just like out of curiosity, I can download that, just bring it in, say like, okay, again, this is a base material I would like to have in my project called demo and import it. And now, because we saved this project also under our project, you can now look, change the filter, just show me the materials that I assigned to that specific project. And then the limestone is also here and I can assign it. And it makes this process, really, really nice, and fast. Now, you can also see you can pick then and activate or deactivate, show me please a normal map or like the height map instantly, and you can see the impact and you have all those options to control, right? I mean, I think this is really super cool. And yeah, that's my beginner tutorial, how to get started with Substance Painter as a beginner. So if you like that beginner tutorial, then I would say if you see any benefits and if you learn something relatively quickly, please subscribe because I'm going to publish more tutorials, not just for Substance Painter, but also looking at other 3D applications that you might be interested to use. And that being said, don't forget to subscribe and click the like button. I really appreciate that, and happy pixeling, and see you in my next upcoming tutorial.